Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The talk on the world of the cybercrime is delivered by Evgeny Voloshin, director of the Bison expert companies. Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me. We have so many people here. I have been introduced already. My name is Evgeny Voloshin. I'm head of the Bison Expert Services Director. And I wanted to share some cases we encounter every day. It's glad to have so many people here with the president's live line going on. It's amazing to have so many people here. What I wanted to talk about today. I chose a provocative title for my presentation. The customer is not always right. And I'd like to talk about clients and their security. What do we have here and how it has developed over the last 5 years? I'll talk more about statistics and trends and how it's changing, how the focus is changing. We can see that in 2015 and 2016, banks and financial institutions have been targets of many attacks. And the landscape and the perimeter were challenging, and the criminals would use it. They would find organizations that were built up in 2000s that had no separate security function, and would just break it and would find vulnerable spots, would use phishing, and got their money. So the criminals, the offenders, they are financially motivated, although sometimes in the TV series and films you can see them romanticized. But today we see the focus is shifting. The offenders' focus is shifted. They are flowing. They go with the flow, and they're targeting individuals, customers, bank clients, us, you and me, as private individuals. So what's happening? In 2017, more than 1 billion rubles was stolen from the banks. I'm using the central bank statistics. I'm not claiming this is the exact figure, because some people don't inform the banks. Some say they had more money stolen. Some claim they had less money stolen, but approximately this is how it looks like. I love this 345 rubles in the end. Last year, we see a drop, 10 times drop, because the offenders are caught and the banks are doing better in securing their POs, and there are governmental and non-governmental initiatives on information exchange, and it brings fruit. Offenders find it more and more difficult to steal money. We understand that banks are mature organizations. They understand that there are risks, financial risks and reputational risks. And they would often not only fight the challenges, but they focus on preventive measures. One more sphere of bank security that we've been dealing with are ATMs. As for ATMs, the statistics is pretty interesting. There's been a 40% decrease in ATM attacks, and it is a serious figure, and it has stayed the same for quite a while. Again, interesting statistics on the distribution of attacks, and we can see that technological attacks, when people are using black box and malware, there are less and less of those. And 93% are actually physical attacks when you, put gas into the ATM or you blow up an ATM. You've seen those YouTube videos when people, tear their ATM from the wall. Today, they're less and less technological. Briefly about black box, it's been an interesting trend. What is a black box? It was a specially prepared device that would be switched onto the ATM interface, and they would go inside. I mean, they would make a small hole in an ATM, and they would switch on in the structure. Banks learned how to fight this, and there are less and less attacks, black box type attacks. What about the companies? What's going on in the companies? Well, the companies are doing better as well. Security directors and heads of the security departments, they can approach CEOs and shareholders, and they are invited to meetings and they're listened to, which is a very good trend and very healthy trend. Thanks to that, they have budgets on security. There are certain security awareness programs run in the companies, and a lot of hardware on the perimeter, and you can see them on the slide, IDSs, and some even have SOC installed. 5 years ago, we couldn't have even dreamt of it. Today, you have processing devices, and cyber criminals find it more and more difficult to work with such organizations. What is happening with the individual security? We understand that attack landscape or surface informational landscape is growing for individual users. We have telephones, we have cloud services, we have computers. I mean, we all have computers, I think. Almost all of us have PCs. But less and less people are using PC. Fewer and fewer people, are using PC. We have your TV, allows you to watch a streaming channel. It is this whole set of devices is only protected by antivirus, and users seldom think of employing other ways of protection. Maybe they should change their passwords, etc., etc. And this provides a big loophole for the criminals. Again, a bit of statistics: 86% of all Russians use telephones as their primary access to the internet, and this statistics is quite interesting. If we look at the years, you will see an exponential growth. 2 years ago, people wouldn't even choose tariffs to have constant access to internet. Today, you can't even imagine your life without messengers, without browsers, without social networks. And how do people use banking services? 86% only use telephones. Out of those 86%, 78% only use mobile applications of a bank. I mean, Sberbank mobile application. And only 7% now use web services for the bank clients. 15% of clients, I'm talking about 50+ people, are still using SMS banking, which used to be pretty vulnerable, and a lot has been done to fight those vulnerabilities and the frauds. It was truly a challenge. And the distribution operational systems, 68% are Androids and 31% are iOS. I'm talking about the Apple operational system, and 1% goes to Windows Phone. Not all banks, when we were collecting the statistics, few banks have clients on Windows Phone and support clients on Windows Phone, but still there's 1%. So, I mean, but it still amounts to a large number if we're talking about the population of the Russian Federation. What did we have previously? We had skimming attacks, when you modify an ATM to read the data from the card, and you get the track 1, track 2. Pink pads were installed to get access to pins, and there were hidden cameras to read the pins. And such attacks were very popular. They are technologically complex, but they were very popular. Another type of attacks which was quite popular is web injects. When a bank client was used, or it was a fat client on a PC, and the fraudsters would create special software that would replace the program and would do injections into the browser, and this is how they would steal money. And it was pretty well spread. Today, we're talking about Android malware and social engineering, and this is something I want to elaborate on. What do we have today? We see the Bison company and our experts. We work on Android malware, and 7,400 mobile devices are infected. We find them infected every week, and that's a lot. And there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of infected devices. Each second telephone, we're talking about people who are not connected to the cybersecurity world. They do have some illegitimate, illegal software installed. Well, it varies the best case, but a situation can be much worse when this malware would steal money from your device, and they steal a lot and regularly, on a regular basis, using various approaches. Criminals find weak victims. We had a client who had 8,000 rubles stolen from him every day, but it took him 3 months to notice it. The subscription was this expensive. He thought that the subscription was 8,000 rubles a day. And in September, one of the botnets, Android botnets, when this network was detected, there were 250,000 infected devices, infected with ASACUB.
Everyone who was in the phone book of the infected device also received links and messages with links to the malware, which was the ASACUB malware. I just mentioned ASACUB, but in fact, there are a lot of botnets. Some are more technically sophisticated, some are produced by a specific group. The law enforcement have really upgraded their skills, but still there are botnets which can be very easily installed, and they are publicly available. Just spend some time browsing online, you will get this botnet kit, and sometimes there is no centralized group that is managing and monitoring the bot, and this is even harder to deal with. But we are still trying to counter it. We try to identify customers, and we block this malware. Those are just some examples of how this malware can be distributed. A couple of photos. Well, the men in the audience are probably trying to look for pictures like that, and then they can be liable to lose their money. The 11% of all the thefts that are taking place, this is the stats from 2010. Thousands of phones per week that are infected, FlexNet, Asacoup, and other botnets. This is just 11% of all that's happening in the fraud environment. 80% is social engineering. Social engineering accounts for 80%. 80% of all attacks on individuals. Social engineering is getting more and more popular, and the methods are quite different from what we saw 2 or 3 years ago. This is statistics for the last 5 years, and we see that skimming used to be the most popular method. Social engineering was mostly used by cybercriminals behind bars, in prison. Now we see the reverse tendency. Skimming is getting less popular. Banks, large and small banks alike, have really focused on combating these threats, and still we understand that people who perform those skimming attacks haven't just given it up. It's not like they went to work at a factory or something. No, they are switching to other methods, other effective methods that they can use to make money. Still a lot of technical malware attacks, and also a large number of attacks with social engineering. The social engineering is gaining popularity. And in this area, we see significant fluctuations. In early 2018, criminals mostly used SMS, both via messengers and regular SMS messages, with text like, please open this link at Avito, or here are a couple of my pictures, those are my photos from my from school. And now there are even call centers that can call victims. And I've seen examples of such calls. I've heard them. This is a brand new level. The scripts for such phone calls are drawn up by skillful people, skillful cybercriminals. Why are they doing it? And what kind of profit are they gaining? It's very easy to make a user transfer money to an account which can be very easily credited. With malware, accounts can be very quickly blocked. With social engineering, criminals persuade people to transfer the money. Often, people need to take time to think about whether they should transfer the money or not. And the account of the criminal can turn legitimate. Building an infrastructure, launching a botnet, it has become really simple these days. What kind of social engineering examples can we demonstrate? Opening a link to Avito no longer works. We almost don't see examples of such frauds. Often criminals send the following text. Lucky you, you can be a millionaire, just go to Forex, or they take any other high-profile brand, and then they try to persuade the person to transfer money to a broker, for example, up to 150,000 rubles. The user performs the transaction, and most probably the money has already been spent, but the user doesn't know yet. So they tell him, you have completed the first round, now you need to transfer some more money. And by the second round, usually banks have already identified this transaction as suspicious. They know that this is a fraudster, and they have scored the account. That means that the score attributed to this particular account lets the bank know that this is a malicious account. So we call the customer and say, please don't transfer the money, it's a fraudster. And sometimes the customers say, no, I want to transfer the money, you are my bank, I will leave you if you don't allow me to transfer this money to that person. We try to explain that, well, you see, you've already transferred 250,000 rubles to them. You want to transfer more? So how do you deal with that? How do you convince your customers? You need to work with people, you need to work with them and provide prompt updates about their transactions and alert them about malicious, suspicious transactions. Another example, you get a call. We provide cleaning services. Would you like to order some cleaning services from us? You answer a number of questions. From the questionnaire, you are interested in these services. And as a result of that survey, of course, they tell you that you have won a big sum of money. Next, you need to provide some personal information to get this money transferred to you. And clearly, it's a fraudulent scheme. A third type of fraud is fraud in loyalty programs, bonus programs of various companies. Spasiba bonus programs from Sberbank or other loyalty programs in retail. It can be easily converted into money. And we have just recently started to monitor the situation in this area. And fraudsters are very actively stealing money from users. Our congress is organized by Sberbank. So these are the examples that we're showing, just as a nod to the organizers. This seems like something benign, but then you receive this pop-up message. Would you like us to help you with your transactions, with filling out your payment instruction, or with transferring money? And if the user is incompetent, lacks the relevant information, they can agree to such help. Our company is busy working on the methods to counter such threats and to deal with such frauds, but fraudsters are just as actively trying to find ways to bypass all those defense mechanisms. And here it's important to understand that with banks, we need to keep up. If we're lagging behind, if we cannot be preventive and proactive, we often face the situation where victims start sharing information online. And it starts blowing this bubble where people and media are all talking about it, writing articles, spreading panic. There was an interesting story recently, maybe some of you have heard. There was this type of fraud where ATMs were prepared for cash withdrawal or for crediting a certain sum to an account. And the ATM was left with those settings. Then the next person comes to the ATM and simply withdraws the cash without any pins, any information. Because the ATM says on the screen, you have 30 seconds, please insert your card to withdraw cash. The victim inserts the card and sees that the cash is not available. We tried to work on all possible scenarios with the bank, but the interesting thing is that in Moscow and in Moscow region, we've only had about 60 incidents like this, but all the media was having a field day with this. So this incident, where a person requests a certain amount of cash at the ATM and forgets to take this cash, to withdraw it, is happening all the time. But nevertheless, it's serious reputational damage, because people start thinking, well, I can have money stolen from me, maybe I should change the bank. This is why large corporations and banks and the entire banking sector all understand that it's important to keep up, it's important to analyze all the new, fresh scenarios of fraud. What else can be done to effectively tackle our talented fraudsters? In cybersecurity, there is this notion. I'm sure someone in the audience works in cybersecurity. So there is this term, threat intelligence. Usually it means exchanging compromising indicators. Sometimes it's united with anti-fraud, and then it also pertains to transactions, to suspicious transactions and information about them, exchanging this information. So what else can be done? We need to analyze all those scenarios that come around, and we need to exchange those scenarios, exchange phone numbers of fraudsters and other data, not locally, not within retail or a corporation, but on the level of an entire region or an entire industry. There is this association of banks in Russia that has been quite effective. They've been exchanging those types of data regularly, and when one bank is targeted, it immediately shares information with all the banks in the industry. It needs to be done in all industries, because very often the attacks that occur in the industry can be similar for several companies. So maybe if we equip ourselves with all these tools, we might be able to find and catch all the fraudsters. Thank you. Are there any questions? We have an open session, just 5 minutes, please. I'm ready to take your questions.
Oh, can I help? Or can I ask you to send over the mics? Well, good afternoon. My name is Igor, Rostelecom company. You suggest to exchange information. Sometimes this information helps you identify the fraudster themselves or their data. What about the Personal Data Protection Act? I mean, what about, the data you transfer while you identify the person that might infringe the law? Very good question. And we've encountered this, and we've worked with it legally, and in the regulatory sense, we can exchange. It's not the whole set of data, like passport number. They can be hashed properly, or non-personalized data for the participants of the exchange could disclose it or could open it up in an automated way. If we're not including classical procession of personal data, this is very possible. It works with transactions. It works with accounts. So it's a working scheme. It can be worked through it can be developed for the persons as well. Besides, I mean, your question has an answer within itself. We need to work with regulators. It can be really beneficial. Regulators today are ready to communicate, and they're being dynamic. So we need to understand it, and we need to talk it through. I hope I answered your question. SAP company, SAP company, Arkady Prokudenko. You said that you both help clients, bank clients, in the loyalty programs as well as in bank transfers when you try to detect these illegal operations. When we're talking about European clients, in terms of loyalty programs and bank transfers, how do you work with GDPR and how do you approach it? Well, these two questions are related. We can't ignore the GDPR. And I know that in the host bank, in Sberbank, they have a separate department that works with GDPR, and it is very important. We as a company, we're smaller than Sberbank, but we have clients in Europe. And when we start working with counteragents from Europe, we can't ignore it. We have a consulting department which deals with GDPR issues. Why do these questions relate? Yes, you can't exchange open data in an open mode. Even the data on fraudsters, we need to have some safe harbor in our laws and in European laws for us to be able to exchange this kind of data. Well, I'll moderate my session myself. Let's take a final question because the timing is very tight, but we could have a tete-a-tete. My name is Mikhail, and I have a brief question. We're talking about a situation when the incident has already happened, so we just prevent it from spreading. Have you ever thought of an algorithm or a process that could prevent these things from happening in general? I know that social engineering is very spread, but machine learning and technology exists that could help us. Well, preventing is difficult in this sphere, prevention. We are trying to reduce the answering time once we detect a fraudulent scheme, and we counter it. For example, recently it has become a frequent fraud when people get telephone calls from the banks from a legitimate number, and people have a higher level of trust, but the fraudster is using the bank's telephone number. And recently, 3 or 4 days ago, there was an announcement that it has been decided with all the operators that you can't imitate Sberbank legitimate phone number. And all the technical measures have been implemented. All other banks are now doing the same thing. So it is a working mode. As for preventive measures, we need to work with clients. We need to raise awareness, raise cyber literacy, Of course, we could do preventive activities, and we do it as well. It's called red teaming. But I think we should focus on security awareness, raising security awareness. We need to raise cyber literacy among clients. And that will help us to kill criminals, to kill the criminal activity in this sphere.